The best way to predict the future is to create it. Welcome to the Humanscape podcast, where we help business leaders prepare for the future of work now. Are you ready to bring work to life and life to work? We are. Let's go. We're back and better than ever with another episode of the Humanscape podcast from HumanWorks8. And today we will be joined by two Sarahs. No, one Sarah wasn't enough. We're actually going to have two Sarahs. Sarah Marshall at HumanWorks8 and today's guest, Sarah Troup from Motion Connected. And we're going to talk a little bit about two things you might not think going together: well-being and technology. I'm Shawn, the thought catalyst with HumanWorks8, and I will be your host for today's conversation. As a reminder, the Humanscape podcast exists to help organizational leaders like you prepare for the future of work now. In just a few minutes, you'll hear from today's guest, Sarah Troup, Director of Engagement Strategy at Motion Connected. But first, Sarah, on my end, how about a little bit about Sarah and Motion Connected?
Yeah, absolutely. Sarah Troup is the Director of Engagement Strategy at Motion Connected, as Shawn said. Motion Connected is a technology company delivering solutions for employee engagement, benefit education, and wellness for over 15 years. With more than 25 years of experience in the medical and wellness fields, including roles as an occupational therapist, medical sales professional, and consultant on employee engagement strategy, Sarah brings a wealth of knowledge and passion to her work. She is deeply committed to empowering employers to foster healthier, more informed employees, ultimately driving better health outcomes and smarter healthcare decisions.
Fantastic. Sarah, does that sound like you?
Well, first of all, thanks, Shawn and Sarah, for having me on. I'm very excited to be part of this and prepping for the future of work. Does that sound like me? Yeah, in writing, yes. Resume writing, that sounds just like me.
Well, what's one thing that, if you had to highlight one thing that we didn't mention that you're most proud of, maybe personally or professionally, what comes to mind, Sarah? What's something from your path to today that you're really proud of?
Yeah, well, I am a mother, so of course I'm extremely proud of my 3 children, 1 in high school and 2 at the University of Madison right now. But moreover, maybe on a professional note, I'm pretty proud of the fact that my husband and I were the ones to really kind of start Motion Connected. Mostly him, but I came along for the ride to help at a year or 2 into it. And we've been able to show our kids that something successful that changes people's lives can basically be built starting from the basement of one of our homes.
Sarah, wow. You said, I don't know about both, but let me tell you, you just brought work to life and life to work right there. And that's what HumanWorks8 is all about, is just thinking about both ends. And, I might have a question about that sort of family and working with your husband. Maybe a little later on, I want to get back to that. What are the great things? But I bet there are some unique challenges. So we'll hold on to that a little bit. You shared a little bit about yourself personally and professionally. We have a segment we like to kick off this, just so our listeners can get to know you a little bit, that we call the 3 parts of the mind segment, where we like to find out a little bit about Sarah that maybe wouldn't come up in a regular podcast conversation. And so the first part of the mind we like to ask about is your cognitive part of your mind, how you think and what you're smart at. And we always ask it this way, Sarah: is there a hidden talent, skill, something you're smart about that people might not ever consider or even know about? What comes to mind when I ask you that?
And I only have to choose one? I still have pretty things I do and learn about.
Touche, I like that.
Okay, well, besides making balloon animals and skateboarding to work, I do really put a lot of time and effort into experimenting and foraging for herbal medicines and mushrooms that I like to make into teas and tinctures. Mostly for myself, but sometimes there's brave people that will share in my teas and my tinctures. But obviously, I care about health one way or another. But I really love this natural remedy stuff and doing it myself.
That is so cool. And I don't,
Cool.
we're building our relationship. I know, Sarah, but I don't think they'd have to be brave. I trust you immediately. I would try any tincture that you put together for me. Okay.
Okay. I just made a multiple mushroom one. It's like the most powerful 4 medicinal mushrooms.
Wow.
It's from and it has your name on it,
Okay.
Shawn.
I like it.
You'll have to let me know how that is, Shawn.
I will tell you, I have not been sick for 2 years since I started taking it myself almost every day in my coffee. Not one day in bed for a cold, sore throat, anything.
All right.
And you have 3 kids, Sarah. So that,
Oh my God, they come oozing and dripping and sneezing by me all the time. And I actually feel very invincible at this point. Like, no, I'm covered.
Sarah, I know you like to think creatively, entrepreneurially, but just by you saying that you haven't been sick for 2 years due to your natural medicines, I see another website on the horizon if it's not there. I bet listeners are going to go, what? I need some of what Sarah's offering.
There's much better experts out there. I'm doing it as a hobby.
Okay.
very cool. Well, Sarah, that was the 3 parts of the mind segment. That was the first part of the mind. We always like to ask the question about the affective part of the mind. So a little bit about your personality. So I'll just ask you this. What's a favorite that you have? What's a favorite of yours? Whether it's a movie, a book, a hobby, something that you like to do?
I think maybe go with food. I feel like I could eat tacos every single day. Maybe even for lunch and dinner.
We should have done this over tacos, Sarah.
We should have. It never gets old. It's just delicious.
Well, Sarah, it is Tuesday, Taco Tuesday. Come on. So there we go. So we at least got part of the track going. And the third part of the mind, Sarah, that I wanted to ask you about is around your instincts. And the way I like to ask that, if you have the freedom to take action your way, how do you jump in and start something? What gets you into the flow or to the zone when you're working? What comes to mind that way?
Well, I think I feed really well off of others. I don't think I come up with anything purely on my own. So I need that little jump start if it's an article, a book. But if I were to try to get something going in the office, it would always start with brainstorming. I just love a great whiteboard session. I love breaking big tasks down into little tasks, big goals into little goals. And I definitely love it if we walk away with an action plan and something to take that progress forward. So I just really feed off of other people.
I love that. And in part of our process, Sarah, I know you took the Colby A index that you and I are going to have a great conversation about outside of this one. And part of that's going to be around you have such strength in what you just said. People always talk their natural instincts. And when you're saying, hey, I feed off of others, of course you do. Do that more. That is so you based on what I know a little about you and based on your result, actually. So I can't wait to talk more about that. You are speaking your natural instincts, isn't you, Sarah?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. I cannot wait to hear that.
You got that. Fantastic. Well, now we learned a little bit about you. Let's get into the conversation today about well-being and technology.
Yeah, let's get to it. Well, Sarah, I know we first met through the Wellness Council of Wisconsin and doing a lot of good well-being work within organizations. But how did your path start in well-being? How did you get to that focusing on people and well-being in your career?
Yeah, well, like I said, it was a brainchild that my husband had with his 2 partners. And it started after he went through his own personal health journey. And I mean, he wasn't a big exerciser. And now looking back, he started tracking his physical activity with that Nike pod thing that was around 16, 17 years ago. And it was great. He decided to do a 5K, which turned into a 10K, which turned into a half marathon, and then into a full marathon, all in a single year. And, if he could do that, we just started talking about, like, what if we could do that across the country? What if we could do that for employers? What if we could inspire more physical activity? Because in terms of well-being, I still believe this to this day. I feel like there's nothing more broad spectrum than physical activity. It's powerful for preventing disease, treating disease. We're experiencing a mental health crisis right now in the employee workforce. There's nothing more powerful than a 20-minute walk that has just as much power affecting our serotonin levels as some of the medications do. It helps with sleep. It makes us drink more water, right? There's so many things, no matter what your goal is. starting with physical activity is such a great starting place. And so, yeah, he had his own personal health journey, hired a programmer, said, I think we can build a platform for this. And then at some point, they were just doing it more locally in Wisconsin. And I said, you know what, guys, I think this could be launched nationwide. And so I came on board to kick it off at a national SHRM show in Las Vegas about 15 years ago.
So our listeners, when you say kick it off and it's a technology-based sort of approach, what challenges might our listeners be experiencing in well-being that Motion Connected and you and your team help solve?
Sure. Yeah. And there's more to it than just physical activity at this point. Being a smaller company and agile, we were able to listen to the market and our clients and prospects through the years and adapt to different needs. And I think some of the things that employees are dealing with is, in my 15 years, the healthcare costs have never plateaued. They've never gone down. They've only increased for employers over that period of time. And the sad state of that is, if that was just those increases in renewals coming year after year after year, I don't know that that's going to be stopped. So the only way we can really help ourselves as people, as employees at our level, is to change the way we interact with healthcare. So well-being is one part of that. Let's try to stay out of the healthcare system if at all possible. And that was really what we did for the first 10 to 11 years, was really just focusing on those preventative measures and physical activity and nutrition. But at the end of the day, over that time, all three of my kids have broken their arms. Once. All of the worst things, trampoline, skateboarding, and monkey bars, all things fun, but leads to broken arms. And I've had to use the healthcare system. Many of us in where I work have to, our clients have to. So then I think the next level thing that employers are dealing with is, that it's so complicated and it's so hard to understand what the cost of care is going to be and how to do it and how to be a good consumer. We're not going to stop having to use it. So our mission has gotten broader, I would say, in the last 4 years to incorporate creating better consumerism amongst employees. Really, I want to do it for us, to save us as employees money and save people. It's just part of my mission. But if we save at that level, I think that's how we strive to help employers save money too, is by creating better consumers and better understanding of the healthcare system, benefits, and levels of care.
And that's so important. I know Sarah and I grew up in an organization that put emphasis on that consumerism, did a lot of training just to understand where that money goes to or doesn't go to. So you're speaking our language or what we believe at the same time, Sarah, through Motion Connected.
Isn't it hard? Well, no one teaches you though. You don't get taught it in high school. You don't get taught it in college. You just have to figure it out.
Yeah, it's kind of like this given thing over here that just you sign up for and you don't even know how to use it well, how to take advantage of it, and also how to think like a great consumer that save you as well as the organization you're working for money that way. And what our approach, and I think I shared it with you, and I think you thought, we called that the sort of a well-being 365 approach. That you need to be updating, learning, sharing information with your team and with your organization really every day of the year. It doesn't stop because there's so much as far as that goes. Would you agree that that is what you're trying to do as well, correct?
100%. The model right now is that employers roll out all their benefits and benefits education one time per year at open enrollment. And then we hope it sticks. We hope that 3 months later when that broken arm happens, that person's going to remember where to find an in-network provider and what to do. And, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to use our technology to be in front of employees more frequently, more often, with the relevant information to help them make healthier decisions.
And I love that approach. We were doing it with just some postings on intranets and different web. We didn't have a technological solution at the time. So that's why I think what you're doing really intrigued us, because we thought, if we had this in where people are that have an easy access to this understanding, it can be such a great thing. Another element is what we believe, and I just wanted to get your opinion on this from what you've seen in the organizations and clients you work with. We like to get the leaders involved, that they had to be involved. We almost make that if you're going to work with us on well-being, It's not just the leaders have to be there and role model. What would you add to that, Sarah?
Well, it's leaders at every level too. It's executive leaders who set the role model, they set the foundation, but also those middle managers and that mid-level leadership that needs to make it okay to engage in well-being efforts and engagements. Sarah, one thing that we did was called 5252. It was every single week of the year, we assigned a leader or a team of leaders to own that week and do something around well-being. So we had everything from knitting to scrapbooking, whatever it was that those leaders did for their own personal well-being. We wanted them to bring that to the table, share that with the rest of the organization, be an inspiring source. One of our clients actually in one of our recent podcasts, the city of Sun Prairie, they're doing a very similar thing. They were talking about teaching pickleball to employees and having a leader come in and kind of lead the charge on learning pickleball. So I think, something like that where leaders are leading the charge, leaders are taking ownership is really important.
So when you think about your app, what is your approach, or how do you get leaders to take advantage of what you're supplying through the technology?
Well, first of all, I agree with you both significantly. And, I did have something interesting happen last week where a broker had brought us two clients at the same exact time. Both started January of last year. Both had the same program, same advisement, very similar. I don't always see the same exact programs. A lot of times they're a little more unique and different. And then we had a call on the same day last week where one was going gangbusters, 95% participation, completely happy with what they were doing, said not one single participant had anything bad to say about the program. The second one, it doesn't happen very often. We have high client retention. They're not renewing next year. And so all the metrics were the same. And, our software was the same. Everything was the same. And the difference, absolutely 100%, was the leadership buy-in. The one program that wasn't moving forward, they had a wellness person managing it who had a lot of other things, no bandwidth for it. And leadership didn't have accounts. Leadership didn't promote it at meetings. No one helped her. She was on an island by herself. And she just said, I don't have the bandwidth to do this anymore. Where the other one, when we met, the VP of benefits was on there. They had a wellness committee. And that I thought a lot about that, walking and thinking about it, because, I felt like, oh, what we do? And I feel like we really did the same thing. And we just didn't have the leaders involved at that one organization. So I almost, I take that story and I taught, we try as hard as we can to get the leaders involved. And the biggest thing is they have to walk the talk. We try to make things a lot more easier for them to manage, push out, build the content that they need, so that frees up time for leaders to simply participate and recognize employees who participate. So we are very forward about, here are reports. Do you have any meetings coming up where you could announce some of these people that have achieved certain things? Could you write letters from the CEO to participants who have done well things? You don't always have to pay people to do things. Recognition from leadership goes so far to motivate and make people feel part of something. And so it's just part of our engagement strategies and consulting, one of the top things. And we have a whole slew of strategies around leadership support. But really, my biggest one is walk the talk, be part of it, and recognize your employees.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. So back on the technology, let me just try to take it a step forward. I went back, but I'm going to go forward. And what I mean by that, Sarah, so what's next? You've had success. You're out there. Is there something in the well-being and technology sphere that you're sort of saying, I don't know where this is going, Shawn, but this is what we're thinking about as they move into 2025 or a bigger picture. Anything come to mind there as you're planning ahead? I know you're planning probably lots ahead, but one thing you would call out or want to share now with our listeners?
We've been putting together more mini courses, which is education. And I would think, oh gosh, education doesn't move the needle. In fact, probably 15 years ago, I'd have been like, no, it's all got to be action-based and no education. And but in the last 2 years, we put together a healthcare literacy course. We put together an emotional well-being resiliency course, and was more doing it just because people were asking. I wasn't sure how much it would move the needle. And I was really involved on both of those courses. So I had to take it personally if they were working or not working. And I was so excited about the results. Both have benchmarks associated with them, both have satisfaction ratings associated with them, and both have open comments from participants. And overwhelming, both of the courses have been over the 90% range in terms of people saying that it's impacted their decisions around emotional resiliency, that it's increased their confidence around healthcare, and then the high satisfaction ratings. So I'm inspired. We're going to take on more programming and specific on the topics that employers are seeking more. And so, yeah, we're looking at sleep modules. We're looking at more stress metrics. Some of the devices are getting really fancy in terms of what you can do from a stress monitoring program. And I love data. So if we can take it and pair the education with data, that's what we're looking at in 2025 in terms of helping with emotional resiliency.
Fantastic. Look, I'm going to do two things. I want to start with your idea of mini courses. I'm all about the small moments, the word small and moments kind of thing, Sarah, rather than these large kind of trainings. So when you use the word mini, that jumped out at me. I'm actually writing about that a little bit in a Wondering Wednesday coming up, because I think that's the shift that we all have to make in this day in life, is that we have to focus on those mini moments of learning, of impact, because I think that's what we carry with us and can really then apply to our life. So I love that. The second thing you mentioned was around metrics, and you've impressed me in our conversation around metrics and how well you do with your technology to track different things. Is there anything that you would add as far as metrics and how you're looking and tracking things that you would say for employee, what you're seeing in those as far as what's ahead, whether it be a trend or an area of focus through what you're tracking numerically?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. The thing that we get pressed upon being an engagement platform is, or well-being, what's your ROI? What's your ROI? And it's interesting to me that we as a third party working with an employer could magically have some ROI. We can't. It has to be a partnership with the employer and what metrics they care about. I can tell you participation rates and who engaged and completers and all that. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything until there's an opportunity to compare that to turnover rate, compare it to claims, to missed days of work. And so ROI with employers is an absolutely collaborative initiative that takes time and energy and data from both sides, but it's one that we take on any opportunity we can for employers who are willing to collaborate on something like that, because it teaches us where to focus our programming. And when I turn around and tell someone else who doesn't have the capability to do that, what's a good program, I have a basis to base it on. But in terms of future things, we still look at what steps mean in terms of just wellness participation. And, our metric that we've always seen is if we can get people to average 6,000 steps for the course of a year, not the course of a month or week or challenge. It was a study that I saw United Healthcare do first, and we just replicated it and got very similar results in terms of decreasing medical spend in those that were in the over 6,000 range versus those that were not. So that's still a key indicator and goal for my clients. But again, I'm digging into those stress metrics, mostly from the Garmin devices that are out there. It's a pretty neat thing. And just looking at some potential algorithms to teach people about learning their own stress meter and then what to do about that, what to put into place to affect their stress meter, and then measuring that after.
Sarah, thanks for calling out that step challenges are still relevant and that there's data and studies behind that. I think that's really important just in thinking about well-being overall and thinking about employee engagement overall. That surprised me. Did you know that?
I don't track my steps anymore. I lost that little. I remember back in the day, Sarah, we had those things where we were tracking those steps. But I'm glad to hear it because walking is a key part of my well-being. I know that's really important. Hiking, walking is something that really, in my individual work on my own well-being, that's a big component of what keeps me going. So I'm glad to hear that as well. If you had to share a learning that if you would pass along to somebody else, maybe trying to do what you're doing, Any learning or two that comes to mind that you'd want to share with our listeners?
Yeah, I mean, sure. I mean, it's interesting because there has been a time or two the kids would be, say something like, "You guys always talk about." Yeah, but that happens. It's almost it can be 24/7. So obviously, it's important to not be 24/7. We all need our separate time and mindfulness away from our occupation, no matter what it is. But just a lot of patience and faith, that we're moving in the right direction. Some ideas are good, some ideas are not good. You try some things, but they were always moving up and always doing things for our customer because it's the right thing to do, not the latest trend or anything like that. Is this the right thing for the customer? And we've always done it that way. If somebody was unhappy, we made it right. If somebody was, overly happy, we asked them to share that with people. And I think it helps. I think our guiding needle of just doing the right thing for our clients and their participants has made it not so stressful and just made it feel like we're moving in the right direction always.
We talked a lot. Is there anything that I didn't ask you or you thought, hey, I thought we would talk about this, Shawn, in the talk? Anything you'd want to highlight that I didn't ask that you'd say, Shawn, this would be important for your listeners to know about the great work we're doing at Motion Connected?
Well, no, I thought culture was coming up. So I had thought a lot about culture in terms of, the way we do it internally or what how we support it externally. And so we're really not the culture content delivery out there in the employer space. We're just that technology that supports employers doing it. So I have gotten to see so many cool things that organizations really large and really small do for their people across the United States, which is really exciting. We're just, the platform that communicates about it, incentivizes, rewards, and educates about what employers are doing. So.
Well, I'm going to finish with culture, actually. So thanks for being
there we go.
And I just said one thing about your culture, this right thing approach, I think is probably a part of your culture. Is there anything else, culturally that you've learned or seen from others and you've said, oh, we're going to take that back and bring that into Motion Connected, whether it's through our use of our own technology, or maybe it's something outside of even the technology that you've seen and learned from the strong relationships you've built that you said, oh, we're going to let's try that back home, in our family, in our culture. Anything come to mind that way, Sarah?
It's more the fun things, right? I think we don't always could get creative in the fun things. And then we'll see an employer doing, kickball tournaments. I didn't know that was a thing that like, oh, wow, if this construction company out in Pennsylvania is doing kickball tournaments, that might be kind of cool to bring back. And yeah, the best thing I can think of that we ever did that was so fun. I don't know if we got it from a client, but our local clients in Green Bay helped us pull it off. And a couple of our partners, we did an amazing race for our employees all through Green Bay. We had to go to Lambeau and we had to go to restaurants and we had to go. And like I said, there were like 3 or 4 clients. We were working with the YMCA back then. So we had to go to the Y for something. And they were ready for us, right? And they were treating us just like the Amazing Race. And so that was maybe the most over top example I can think of. But I like stealing the fun ideas that we might not come up with to create a fun culture.
So cool. We're going to do an Amazing Race here. I just decided that counts. That sounds very fun.
Oh, the clothes. My blood just kind of like spikes thinking about it right now.
No, it's exciting. The gears are spinning. I have a question too, Sarah, just going off of that. When you're looking at what's ahead for the organization in 2025 and beyond, what's something that sticks out to you that a goal that you really want to have for Motion Connected internally for your people and your culture?
Well, my favorite thing to see is just our employees thriving. I love it, and when I see them buy a new car or get a house or, have their second child, like that, being able to provide the stability as an employer for these employees to create lives, it feels like we've done that ourselves. Our children are getting older, and we're seeing our employees now be at the ages of having children, buying houses, cars, and it just feels like we're passing the torch a little bit. And that's what really gets me going. And so at the end of that, that's just, a business goal essentially, but the business goal equates to being able to provide that more stability back to our employees so they can continue to thrive in their personal lives.
I do. One of our beliefs, and I guess I'll wrap it up with that. We're called Human Works 8, Sarah, I think and we have 8 beliefs and truths. And one of them is everyone thrives. That's what we're trying to build in the culture. So you're doing that there, and I can tell it's important to you. And that's what we're really, I think everything we're trying to do and you're trying to do is about, helping people thrive in this day and this life and what's ahead. Sarah, I want to thank you so much for the conversation. The time just zoomed by, but I want to highlight 5 things that jumped out at me. As we were talking, Sarah, and Sarah both added a bit, something I don't mention, but there were 5 things that jumped out at me in the conversation that I think are really good points or notes for people listening. The first was how your tech and Motion Connect's tech approach really aligns with helping organizations with that 365 well-being approach, keeping it alive even when they're not doing anything. It can stay alive. And I think we both agree that that's so important. The second highlight, I would say, is you talked a lot about leadership buy-in and saying how important that is. And one thing you said, they have to walk it, live it, share it. I was trying to think, what would be the leadership sort of actions? They have to do all of those things. But then you mentioned a word that jumped out. They also have to recognize it in others and really highlight it when they see others on the team doing something different or trying something. And that's up to a leader to call out and to get involved that way. The third thing was around this mini courses. And I want to learn more about your sleep and stress sort of focus as you move forward, because I do think those are 2 things people struggle with in work and in life. And I like your mini course approach. And then the fourth thing, I have 5. Sometimes I only end up with 3. So Sarah, it's been filled here, 5. You said something about ROI, and I think that's a struggle with organizations to think well about ROI. It's kind of expected, but then it's like, okay, how do I do it? You used a word or tied a word to ROI that I didn't see linked, and you said it was collaborative ROI. I think there's something in that I think a lot of times organizations or even, a startup company thinks of ROI as this separate kind of thing, and it's hard to do ROI in a vacuum. So, when you said collaborative ROI, I think there's something about that, especially in the well-being sphere, that I think is really powerful. And then finally, I want to add you jumped out at me when you talked about this right thing approach. And I think that can also sum up around people trying to elevate cultures just in general, that you've got to take that right thing approach. And what might be a right thing for one organization might not be for another. As individuals are, very unique, so are organizations. So those were 5 things that jumped out at me.
That's great, Shawn. I didn't come to this podcast with those 5 in my pocket, so that's wonderful. I'm learning too.
Well, you did. They may not have been in your pocket, but they were up there. They were in your mind, and they came out in the conversation. So, Sarah, thanks so much for spending some time with Sarah and I here in Milwaukee. I want to tell all of our listeners to subscribe to this show wherever you get your podcast and learn more at humanworks8.com/podcast. Connect with Sarah Troup at Motion Connected online. She's on LinkedIn, as well as Sarah and myself. And if you all want to know a little bit more about what I'm wondering about each week, I gave you a little hint about what's ahead around this small element. Subscribe to my Wondering Wednesday blog on LinkedIn. I wish everybody a very healthy and well-being moment as you move forward into the new year. And again, thanks, Sarah, for joining me today.
Thank you, Shawn and Sarah. Appreciate it.
Change is inevitable. Growth is optional. Now it's up to you. See you next time.